So let's kick off. I usually preface these talks by saying that Papers Past is useful for all manner of research. It's not just about family history research, but we're smack bang in the middle of Family History Month. And let's be honest, lots of us are family historians. So I will be throwing a few family history specific tips in here. But keep in mind that the information I'm sharing and the tips I'm sharing are mostly equally applicable to any other type of research. So with that in mind, welcome to the Papers Past site. This is our homepage. You can get to it by Googling Papers Past, or you go to paperspast.natlib.gov.nz, and we have 5 collections. 6 collections. We'll get to that later. The one you might be most familiar with is newspapers. So the bulk of my talk, I'll focus on the newspaper section, but we'll dip in and out of the other collections too, and I'll give you some pointers on where they might be useful for certain things, because they do all have different applicability and different value for different things. So we'll start with newspapers. Hopefully some of you have seen this page before. Now, the first thing to note with all of our collections, like the newspapers collection, the magazines collection, etc., is that most of these have organized your access to the collection around 2 ways of getting to content. And the 2 ways, in a nutshell, are browsing and searching. Browsing, I think, is worth dwelling on for just a minute. It's quite important when you're looking for a really specific page or a specific date or specific newspaper. And the scenario for that is, I'm typically in family history research, you're looking for a birth notice and you know a person's birth date, and you have a few thoughts about where that birth date's going to be published. Now, you've got a date to work off and you know roughly where it might be, so you would browse. This is a really good way to find birth notices. It's very thorough. It doesn't rely on the optical character recognition in Papers Past being accurate or correct. It relies on your eyes to spot the information you'll need. So equally, this approach is also really good for historic events. If you have a date where an event happened and you want to see the news around that, browsing is a really good way to go. It's very, very thorough. Just takes a bit longer, but I'll show you browsing. If you click on any of these 3 buttons, you're going to go to this whacking great list of newspapers, and it's sorted alphabetically, but you could also sort it by region. If you double click on these columns, that will sort the opposite way around. You can sort them by year. You could also view all newspapers for a specific date to have a look at maybe all coverage around one particular date or one particular event. You could look at newspapers within a certain date range like this. So this page is handy. Just to give an example of how this might look, you can, if you have a hypothetical birth date for a person, let's say January 1922, you click on the newspaper that you're interested in, seeing if there's a birth notice in it. You click on the calendar for that year. You click on the date in question. Let's say it's the 16th of January. Here's that newspaper. Here's that edition. And you can see on the left-hand side, you've got a list of the articles in here. This is a computer-generated list. It's mostly going to be correct. Sometimes it will get the title wrong or might miscategorize it. So be aware of that. Images of the pages here are more useful if you're looking to do that old school library microfilm experience where you want to read the dots off the page and actually find things, irrespective of anything computer generated. So you've got 2 options. But if you were looking for that birth notice, you could go straight to here, and well, this reveals to you that the print quality on this particular issue is pretty poor. This is not unheard of. We try to find the best quality microfilms we can for our digitization, but sometimes we can't find a better quality copy in existence. And if you've only got 1 copy of a date of a newspaper, it's better to have some copy than none. So this is something that you will see occasionally. But you can also browse to the pages. Now, again, this doesn't resolve our print issue by any way, shape, or form, but these pages here allow you to browse to the next page within that newspaper. If you needed to go to page 2 or page 3, you can do that. This little not address bar, navigation bar across the top, I call it a breadcrumb trail. It reflects the structure of the collection itself, and you can use it to navigate around the collection. For example, if you're looking at this article here, but, well, print quality is not great, and let's say you want to see the next column or the next article on that page, you can use the breadcrumb trail to click where it says page 3, and that'll take you to the view of that whole page. You can click on the date there and it'll take you to the issue that contains that page and that article. You could click on the title, it'll take you to that title. So this little bar here, click on these things and you can navigate between the various levels. So the levels of a collection will be like, here's all newspapers. Within all newspapers, you've got titles, right? Click on that, takes you to the title. Within each title, you've got a date. So you click on that, you've got a date. Within the date, you've got pages. Here's some pages. On pages, you have articles. So it is a hierarchic collection, and that's what that breadcrumb trail relates to. Use this to navigate your way around, because you'll find occasionally that you need to look at the whole page. If, for example, you're only seeing half of an article, and there should be the rest of the text there somewhere, you want to look at the page to get the full picture. The other thing I would quickly introduce to you on these pages when you're browsing is that you can save a copy of a page at a very high resolution. If you want to take a copy of a page out for maybe inclusion in your own family tree, or to snip out an article at a really good quality, go to the Save a Copy button in the top right and choose high resolution image, and that's the best quality image we have. These are often sort of 40 or 50 megapixel images. They can sometimes come from an image source which is not great, as you saw with the previous newspaper. But we've certainly put a lot of effort into making sure that we get the best quality we can from the source that we have access to. So that's a very quick look through how you browse through newspapers. And to a large extent, it's very similar for magazines. Magazines aren't too dissimilar from newspapers. They have a lot of very similar considerations. So the way that you navigate through them is pretty similar. Ooh, cars, dates, etc. You can see how that works. Fairly straightforward. I think one of the really useful things that Papers Past brings is the fact that it allows you to search by keywords. And this is handy because Papers Past has roughly 90 million articles in it. And it's not possible to browse to find every instance of everything that you need to find. It's just not practical. So search is a godsend. It really speeds things up. And the enormous plus is that we'll search through the entirety of the collection in a second, or in a fraction of a second. So that's great. The trade-off is that it's not able to perfectly match your search term against the image on the page in every case. I'll show you why that is in just a second. But let's start with a basic example of a search. Search is really variable because it depends a lot on the words or the names you put in. For example, in the names, if you've got an uncommon name that you're looking for, you're in a really lucky place because you're not going to get a huge number of results. And if you've got a surname like Smith or Jones, you're dealing with a big pool of results, and it can really take a lot of wrangling to find exactly the thing you need. So I'm lucky. The surname Vandy isn't that common, so there's not a huge number of results for Vandy. But if your name is Smith, just give you a very quick example, you're going to be battling with 5-point-something million results. There we go. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff to wrangle with. So let's go back into just quickly how search is imperfect. So you saw with that Auckland Star article that I first clicked on that births column, the letters weren't printed super clearly. They're a bit, the image quality of the microphone was poor. It was a little bit fuzzy, so it wasn't able to recognize exactly the words in the article. So what that's going to do is you might see scenarios where words are misrecognized. So this is, I guess, essentially the view that our computer has of the words on the page. You can see that for the bulk of these words, they're correct, but for the odd one here and there, they're not recognized correctly. So this is a little conundrum. If you're searching for a term and say 95% of them are recognized correctly, what about the other 5%? How do you find those? How do you deal with that? There are some strategies, but for the time being, just note that that is the case. We'll come back to this a little bit later on. So for the time being, I'm thinking more about this family history problem, and your name is Smith, or the person you're looking for might be a Smith or a Jones. How on earth do you deal with 5.3 million matches for Smith? Well, the solution is think about the material you're looking for. Think about what that material looks like. If you're looking for an article about a Smith ancestor and maybe their involvement in the horse racing industry, just putting in the word Smith is probably of limited use to you because you'll get all the Smith results. But you want the results that are about Smith and include maybe the word horse or the word racing. So think about it like that. What are the words that are unique to the article or the item that you're looking for? You've got to think of it kind of like a fingerprint. In the case of looking for people, the lowest common denominator and like the starting point should always be the surname. Because if you're going to recognize that person, they'll be mentioned by their surname in the article. So I would generally, from a family history perspective, start by searching for the surname. And that obviously applies even in this scenario where we're dealing with Smiths. Yeah, just treat this as your starting point though. So from this point, you want to add in other words from the type of thing that you're looking for. Now, if you're looking for birth notices, your first question should be, what does a birth notice look like? Because if you don't know what they look like, it's hard to create a search that's going to really zero in on those. I'll show you what I mean. We'll go back to that Auckland Star. We'll go back to the one that we spotted that was, oh, we'll go to a better one that maybe looks good. Hopefully this one looks good. This. No, it doesn't look great. Okay. I'm going to go to the next issue, see if we have a similar problem, and we quite likely will. Okay, see, here's some, they do have poor print quality. Take a close look at these, and obviously we're lucky, we're people, and we can probably make sense of these words on the page despite the fact they're printed poorly. There's a few things you might notice. There's a couple of patterns. We've got the surname. All of these have the phrase either a son or a daughter. You can check that in each of these cases. Two of these also have the phrase both well. And it looks like these also mention the date, and they're using a format with month and then the day the child would have been born on. So there's your fingerprint. You've got a name. You've got the words a son or a daughter. You've got, in some cases, both well, but that doesn't occur in every case. So maybe just file that away in the back of the noggin and come back to that later. But they're also mentioning the date. So now we've got an understanding of what a birth notice looked like, published in a particular newspaper, roughly around a particular date. So that little block of information gives us an idea of how to construct a search for other births in that newspaper, roughly in that time period. Surname, a son or a daughter, and a mention of the date. So now let's construct a search that matches that pattern. I'm going to stick again with using the very generic name Smith. We're going to search for, in this case, a son. You'll see I put it in quotation marks. If I just added the words a son, it'll give me results for articles that contain Smith and the word a and the word son. So that'll contain what we want. But if you put quotation marks around the two words that occur in a specific order or a specific pattern, this is only going to give you results where they occur in exactly that order or that pattern. So that's handy. So we've got Smith, we've got the phrase a son, and they mentioned a month and a day. Let's just say February. And I won't put the exact date because I don't know of a Smith born on an exact date at some point in history. So bear with me. But anyway, so a birth notices from that newspaper, they contain a surname, the phrase a son or a daughter, and they mention a month. So if I click search now, we should see some birth notice type results appearing. I'll have a look. Okay, so that's quite targeted. I haven't filtered it by date, I haven't filtered it by region, I haven't filtered it by type of content, but you can see that this content all looks very specific to births. So this is because we've used search terms, search words that are really specific to birth notices. We can do another example of that. Let's think of this maybe in terms of the other great punctuation event in people's lives, deaths. What does a death notice look like? Don't know if there are any deaths in this paper. Let's find out. Yes, there are. There's a deaths column. Okay, they look like this. There's a surname. Once again, we have a month. Is there any other common language? Son, wife. So there's family relationships mentioned as well. At her residence or at hospital. Okay, so language like that. So if I was writing a search term for a death notice, date, if you're looking, if you know the date, that's going to help. Otherwise, the month, that's going to help. The name, terms like either, well, the word residence, were they a husband or a wife? Because it looks like the word wife or, you know, daughter, son, etc. Those terms are mentioned. So constructing a search term for a death notice would need to use language that's specific to death notices. Now think about this in extension to other types of material. If you're looking for results for, let's say, this hypothetical Smith ancestor who was somehow involved in horse racing, you might search for Smith and the word horses. Now this would give you back articles that contain the word Smith and the word horses. Let's say you add another word in there. You see we've brought that pool of 5.3 million Smiths. We added the word horses. That brought us down to about 490,000. We added the word racing. That's now 77,000. So you can see that adding more words gives you a smaller pool of results because each time the article has to correspond to a narrow range of criteria. The article has to contain, you know, 3 words. If you add a 4th word in there, you're going to get an even smaller pool of results, but it also means you're looking for something much more specific. So there's your trade-off. Do you make the search term too specific? You can make it too specific. You want to make it just specific enough, otherwise you're going to miss stuff out. And this is also why I didn't start straight in at the deep end of searching for Smith, horses, racing, trotting, saddle, and all that sort of stuff, because it's just going to leave you with such a vanishingly tiny amount of data that you're probably going to miss out some of the valid stuff that you're trying to surface. So you normally do it sort of iteratively. You start with that broad search for Smith and you see how many results you get. You know, you search for the surname, see how many results you get. Then you might put in a keyword that might appear in the type of article or the type of item you're trying to find. Let's say you might be looking for some mentions where a Smith family had a house fire. The word fire is likely to have been mentioned in that article, so throw the word fire in there. Where did the fire happen? Do you know where the family lived? They might have lived in Nelson, in which case, did the article mention Nelson? If you're confident that it did, add the word Nelson in there. And once again, you can see that big pool of Smith results is becoming more and more specific. Let's say the word brigade. Brigade spelling is likely to have appeared in the article. If you make that judgment call, if you think that's relevant, then put that word in there as well. It's given us 16,000 results. It's brought it down quite a bit, but there's no limit to the number of words you can put in. The only issue is the fact that you are making it very specific search result the more terms you put in. So what this means is that any result out of the 16,000, it has to contain each one of all of these 4 words. Now that's all well and good. What if we have some results where we want to remove certain things? Let's say, I got given a really good example by a Papers Past user a year or 2 ago who had the surname Garlic. I've used this example before. Now, this person was plagued by all of these advertisements and mentions of a business called Tonson Garlic all throughout their stuff. So they're searching for the surname Garlic, but they don't want all this Tonson Garlic stuff. So there are some solutions for that. The starting point for me would be to search for garlic and then put up minus Tonson. This will give me every result that contains garlic that does not contain the word Tonson. And you can see that's brought, well, what did we have previously? We had 95,000 results. If you put that minus Tonson in there, that brings it down to 65,000 results. Now you will notice that there is still a Tonson here. You and I can see this. We're people, we can read. Our computer can't. It hasn't recognized the word Tonson because the print quality is not great. Just to confirm this, we look at text here, the text view, because the letters are all printed in quite bold font. It's picked that up as tonsori, so not correct. And that's why it hasn't removed that particular one. But you can see how that trick using minus works. It's handy, and it's another way to make a big pool of results smaller. So that's trick number 2 for making a pool of results a bit more manageable and easy to work with. This is, for some of you who are familiar with using Boolean operators, this is the Boolean operator for not. So just to unpick the search term here, I want results for garlic, results that include the keyword garlic, but do not have the keyword Tonson within them. Now, there's no limit to the amount of nots you can put in there. We could have garlic, but not Tonson and not shop. So in theory, this would remove those articles as well. So it's brought us down from 66,000 to 59,000. And you can chisel away quite surgically at those big pools of results to make them smaller by doing stuff like this. But be aware of the collateral damage, because you will get some collateral damage. An example would be a person like George Day. If you're searching for George Day, you would see tons of results for St. George's Day. So you might go minus St. You might have George Day minus ST, which is very clever. But you might also be removing any result that includes the abbreviation for the word street, because it's also ST. So that would inadvertently remove a heap more than what you intended. So just be a little bit judicious. It doesn't hurt to try it. Do your search. Keep track of how many results you see. If you see them wildly swing one way or the other, maybe just have a think about whether or not you've inadvertently excluded or included a few too many things. Now, one of the questions I get asked about with Papers Past quite a bit is, where's the advanced search interface? And I'll show you where it is. You're using it, it's right there. When you have all of these words search type selected, you can do all these tricks like the minuses and adding extra keywords and including phrases, things like that. I won't hit search on that because it might not give me any results, but you can combine a range of operators together to work flexibly. The search box becomes a space in which you can use fancy tricks like the not and the and phrase and other things like fuzzy search, etc. These other search options, they're kind of presets. If I was to type any of these words, and if I was to put 2 words in there, like cat and dog, effectively I'm searching for cat or dog. If I was to choose this exact phrase, it's going to search exactly for the phrase cat dog, which won't show up obviously. Whereas if I do all of these words, I can combine all of those things. I could say cat or dog, and I want a phrase included in my results as well, like that. So that, see if that gets any results. 2 results. So you can see how that combines different types of search into one. So the thing for you to note is that all of these words, if you have that option enabled, that's your advanced search. And it's up to you to maybe experiment a little bit with including some of the fancy little tricks like multiple keywords, the minuses, the ors, phrases, and things like that. And these other options, they're presets. Feel free to use whatever gives you good results. There's no right or wrong answer. While I'm looking at this panel, a couple of little basic things. You can search through all of the content. We do have people who will come back to Papers Past every few weeks or few months, and when we add new content, they only want to search through the new content. So you can choose to do that as well. So we typically release something like around 100,000 pages in a batch, and we might do that 4 to 6 times a year. So if you want to search just that batch of new content, the most recent one, for example, you tick this and it would search only within that new data. So a few weeks ago, we released some material from the press and 3 other papers I've just forgotten right at the moment. But if I search with that option and I put in a common term, not very creative, I know, but it's going to get me some results. And you'll see we get results from just those papers. It will be Wairapa age. There will be some press. They get sorted in my title. But yeah, that type of search, that option, will bring things from just the most recent batch, which in this case is Wairapa age, Waikato Times, the Timaru Herald, and the press. So if you are the type of person that does come back to the site now and then you want to just search through this stuff, you can just use that feature there. I probably haven't dwelt quite enough on, I guess, how we make the site searchable, because I think it'd be useful for you folks to have a little bit of an understanding about that. Like, I won't get super technical or anything, but handy stuff for you to know would be that we start with microfilm. We get reels of preservation master microfilm. It's the best quality microfilm we can get in terms of image quality. We choose the individual reels that have the best image quality we can get, and we feed those reels through a scanner which does, scans every image on that reel. So it'll be hundreds of pages at a time. And that gives us images that look like this. So we then take those images and we run them through what's called an OCR process. And that's, long story short, that's where the computer tries to recognize every letter that's on the page. And it also tries to record where that letter is and where each word is. And that's what powers the search function. So computers aren't as smart as you and I, as much as they would probably like to be. They are thrown off by things like variable print quality, or if there's the odd smear of ink on a page here and there, it might think it's a full stop. Might change what a letter looks like. It might make a letter L look like the letter I. All those kinds of little things will throw off that computer recognition process. And it means that some of the words, they're not recognized perfectly. They're not going to be completely exactly right. Like we have a word TL. I don't know what that's recognition based on, but how do you deal with that when you're trying to find particular types of things and the words aren't recognized correctly? I'll show you a search trick. It's fuzzy search. And a fuzzy search is where it gives you results that are very close to a certain word, but you can specify how many letters within that word are allowed to vary. Now, I'll use my surname, why not? Vandy. 847 results, not that many. Now, if I was to do a fuzzy search, it'll give me every instance of every word that's within one letter of being Vandy, V-A-N-D-Y. So it might recognize words like, and non-dictionary words, like V-A-R-D-Y. So the newspaper might have spelled Vandy correctly, but our computer generation process may not have recognized it, and it might think it says Vardy. So if you do a fuzzy search like this, it's going to include those results where one of the letters is misrecognized, and this will invariably give you more results, particularly for things like birth notices. Actually, not particularly those, for anything it'll give you more results. So we had 847 results. This will probably give us more. Oh yeah, it has. Yeah, and you can see why, because there's other words that are very similar to Vandy that are one letter different. Randy Pandy, Sandy, etc. So we've included those. If you have a name like Smith, however, and you got your 5.3 million results for Smith, what does a fuzzy search for Smith look like? There's going to be lots of occasions where Smith is represented as SMJTH. So you can see it had 5.29 million, and now it's gone up to 5.33 million. So you've got an extra 44,000 results for Smith. And again, this is kind of case by case, because Vandy is similar to Sandy and all sorts of other words, whereas Smith, there's not a huge amount of other words that are kind of just like Smith. So for some names, it'll be really useful. For some words, it'll be really useful. For other words, like, think of a word that, yeah, like the word the or there. There's going to be a lot of words that are like there that have more than one letter variation. So you'd have a huge pool of results, and that wouldn't be handy. Sounded like a bit of a ramble on my part, sorry. I hope that is fairly straightforward. The long and short is, our computers don't always recognize words accurately. And if you want to surface instances where those words are misrecognized, doing a fuzzy search is one of the ways to do it. Another way to do it would be to be specific about which letter might be misrecognized. You would recognize this word. You know? What if one of those letters is commonly misrecognized? Let's say that second R. You could search for that. You can see the pool results has gone up slightly, 1.02 from 1.007. So there we've got an extra 13,000 results that have misrecognitions of Rotorua where that specific letter has been recognized incorrectly. So that's one approach. And another approach might be something like that. This is a wild card. It's an asterisk. So this is going to give me every word that starts R-O-T-O-R, and that will be things like rotary, not just Rotorua. So you can see it will bring back a lot more results, but it's one way of substituting for multiple letters. So whereas the question mark substitutes for one letter only, the asterisk substitutes for multiple letters. And depending on the word or the name you're searching for, that can be a really handy thing. I think it's probably worth noting, just for you guys to keep in mind how case by case things are with names. I touched on that briefly, I guess, already, but it's worth thinking about. Uncommon names are really easy to search for. Common names and looking for specific people with common names, a bit trickier. What would be handy? Common things I think that family historians search for are things like passenger lists and shipping lists. The approach for finding those is very similar to what I did for birth notices and death notices. If you're not quite sure what they look like or quite sure how to set up a search for it, we'll just quickly work through a scenario so that you can maybe find passenger lists yourself. So here's how I would go about it. Personally, I would start by looking for a newspaper from the region of, the port that you're interested in, where your ancestors or the people you're looking for might have arrived in. Let's say Littleton. A lot of people came into the country via Littleton. And let's say they came in the 1870s. So we want to see a sample of an 1870s passenger list from Littleton. Now, the best way to do this is actually just to go to one of these newspapers and read it and see what it looks like. Now, shipping. Shipping is the column to look for. It lists the names of the ships. And in cases with a berth, it will also list passengers. So in the case of this newspaper, these articles will always include, well, the word shipping, if it gets recognized correctly, the word Littleton, looks like they used arrived. They'll have the name of the ship. You may or may not have that or need that. But the other thing you can be looking for is the surname of those people. So the surname, you've got the word shipping, you've got the name of the port, and you've got a rough date idea. Cool, that's enough to start your search. Let's set a search for the place or the title you're looking for. So I'm just going to cheat and go straight to the Littleton time. I'm going to set up a date filter because I'm looking for a date notice, a shipping notice from the 1870s. And then you want to whack your search terms in there. God, this feels like a day where I'm cheating so much. I'm going to use again a really common name. Normally I would take suggestions from the audience, but I can't hear you folks, so I have to subject you to boring surnames rather than using the surnames you're particularly curious about. So the word shipping was included. The port was included. And often the word passengers is included in those articles as well. So let's do that search there and see what we get. It should be relatively targeted to shipping notices. And it looks kind of like that's what we've got. Yeah, we do. We have mention of passengers. And looks like we don't have a lot of number of passengers. We do have a couple of passengers mentioned up here. I'm a bit more used to like quite long passenger lists of 40 or 50 people. But there's an example. Once again, we're reading the material first to get an idea of what a search term for it might need to include. What words should that search term include? And then we're going and creating our search term. And then you'll see we get a bunch of results. So that's how I'd go about looking for search notices. I'd backtrack briefly just to birth notices as well for just a minute, because there's one very family history specific tip that I'd share with those. And we saw it, I'll find a newspaper that shows this issue. Most newspapers for the thick end of the 19th and 20th centuries use this weird little printing format for names within birth notices. We can pretty much choose any date. Anything where there's a birth notice. Will there be some in here? There might be. No, not in that issue. Next issue. Remember using that on the navigation bar? Next issue. I don't actually know where the family notices are, so again, cheating. Here we go, births. So it should take us to a column of birth results. Right, cool. And this shows the thing I'm about to talk about. So if you look closely at this article, you see it's got a surname. Now you and I recognize that as a name. That's the name, that's the word, done. These other letters after it don't matter. They matter to our OCR, our computer text recognition process. You'll see that there's no space between the name and the full stop, and then this long dash and the word on. So when computer text recognition is working, it identifies a word by going, well, there's a space at the start and there's a space at the end. The bit in the middle must be the word. And it looks for matches for that word. So if what we've got here doesn't have a space after the name. So here's your name, and it thinks all these extra letters after it are part of the name. So how can you match a name with all these extra, non-dictionary characters? The word Hampton -- on is not a name, it's not a word. How do you surface it in your search results? There is a solution for that, and it's those wildcards that we talked about before. Let's do a quick little search. So the name that we were looking for was Hampton. Let's just see how this appears. Hampton, okay. If we search within this issue for Hampton, it may not turn up. Oh, it did this time. So it turned up there, but it hasn't found this one here. I know this is part of the same notice, but bear with me for a moment. So if it's not finding this one here, it may not in all cases find the birth notice, because it may not mention the surname elsewhere legibly in the article, in the birth notice. But the solution would be to search for Hampton and then an asterisk, that wild card for multiple unknown letters. So if you look at the search term, it means Hampton and any other letters or characters that follow the word Hampton. And in this case, it would actually make that result turn up if it didn't already turn up, because it was mentioned here. This particular example is not the greatest, but I see this all the time because the printers always use this weird little format with the dot and the long dash and the word on immediately after it. It means those results don't turn up in regular birth notice type searches. So the solution is to do that wildcard search, and then think about your other keywords like son, etc. So if you're hitting a bit of a brick wall finding birth notices in particular, don't forget that every single newspaper that we had pretty much used that annoying little format for printing names, and it does make searching for specific names a little bit difficult. If you want to surface them, you might want to think about throwing a wildcard after the name. I'm trying to find another one just to find a better example for you. Try this one. Martin or McKinnon. Yeah, the same issue would apply. Often searching for Martin, that result may not turn up. And here is what that word effectively looks like as far as our computer is concerned. What are some other essential things for you folks to know about or to understand? Probably one thing would be a little bit of credit where credit's due. This is our stats page. What I would like to show here is just the size of the collection. And this is not to big note us in any way, shape or form. I would just like to point out that all of this work, scanning all of this material, the bulk of this was done by 2 people. There's 8 million odd pages worth of content scanned here, and it's my colleague Tracy and my colleague Mel that I would like to acknowledge for doing all of this work. Because the star of the show here is not the Papers Past site, it's actually all the content in the Papers Past site, and it's that massive digitization effort that they're responsible for that has resulted in us having the ability to use this resource and search through this material. So my acknowledgements to them. They have done some unbelievable work. Some I guess, other basic little housekeeping. When you're using the Papers Past site and you're searching for some names, or some people, or some subjects, or some things, some terms, you don't have to just restrict yourself to one material. If you click on any other collection, it's going to take you to search results for that same term in those other collections. So if you have a search and you just click on another collection, it's going to take you straight to those other types of results. Magazines and journals are fairly straightforward. I find them personally an amazing resource for recipes. I like to cook, and there's tons of amazing recipes in there. I'm always on the lookout for a really good dates gone recipe, and it's a common search term that I would use, and this is where I would find it. More pertinent for family history research, I think, is, dare I say it, probably the New Zealand Police Gazette. If you're lucky enough to be getting results for searches from the Police Gazette, one of the things that you might find really handy are the mugshots. The photographic quality of images of people in the Police Gazette is superb compared to what it is in the newspapers collection. Now, I've seen a lot of instances where people have emailed us saying, "Oh, I found this amazing photo of great Uncle Bert in this thing called Police Gazette. What's he in there for?" And you've got to be a little bit respectful and delicate around why they might have appeared with a mugshot in the Police Gazette. But heck, are these images great? Like, the actual image quality is brilliant, as you can see, compared to a newspaper. The print quality is a step up. So if you want to see good likenesses of your ancestors, and if they got up to a bit of mischief, then you're in luck with Police Gazettes. It's a brilliant title. And just to explain a quick little thing for you about it, you'll see these inscrutable looking codes beneath the images. Now, I got no idea what all this stuff, FP class 2917, etc. I don't know what that means. But this part here, PG 1021, this is really handy. What that means is Police Gazette 1910, page 21. And that page, if I go to that reference, this will tell me what James Barnes did. And that will give people context. So if we go to page 21 for 1910, this one starts on page 47. So we're looking at the previous issue. Page 39, page 25, page 21. So he is mentioned somewhere on this page. Now, because I have a memory like a goldfish, I have just immediately forgotten his name. But here you have a description of his offence, when it happened, where the court case was, and also things like, their build, their appearance, distinctive marks, that kind of stuff. And this helps flesh out your picture of the people that you're looking for. It's a really, really interesting resource. Having the information, obviously, for the name and some kind of event happening, it's really handy then to be able to jump into the newspapers and look for court reports. What's another useful thing for you folks to know? Books. We've just started a books collection. It's a very young collection, so it's raw as all heck. It contains a lot of titles that we just scanned because we needed test cases for certain things. So we haven't taken any sort of deep curatorial look at the type of material that the collection should consist of in the long term. It's actually just all our test data. But it does also include a bunch of works from the Natangario Maori collection. And that's quite a special little collection. So I mentioned at the start that we have 6 collections in Papers Past. You might have looked across the top and gone, no, it's 5. Aha, we have 6. The 6th collection is the Natangario Maori collection. And this is every printed work in Te Reo Māori from the 19th century, every single work known to have existed. Now, from a perspective of a person who's trying to learn a bit of Te Reo Māori, this is a phenomenal resource because it's Te Reo Māori written by people who often never spoke a word of English, and they spoke Māori, how it was spelt, how it was pronounced, how it was spoken before Pākehā, before English settlers got here. So it's a snapshot of as the language was at that point in time. Now, this Natangario Māori collection, it's not just one type of material. Like, it's not just books. Some of the material is in parliamentary papers, and some of it is in magazines and journals. Some of it is in newspapers. Whereas, I guess from a European perspective, we consider like a collection of newspapers, and it's just that type of material. Whereas Natangario Māori, it's in every one of these collections. And you can search for that material simply by searching for the keywords you're looking for. So these will be Te Reo Māori terms, you know. Search through the Natangario Māori collection, and you'll see the interface changes slightly to give you that cue that you're looking through some different material. Then you hit search, and boom, there you go. You got some search results, all written in a lovely, beautiful snapshot of Te Reo Māori from particular dates. If you click on any one of these other collections, you'll notice that it's taken your search term into that new collection, and it's kept it focused on Te Reo Māori, on the Natangario Māori collection. And same again with newspapers. Same thing occurs. So this collection, I think, is really, really special. There's about, I think, 1,500 or 1,900 items, that sort of magnitude. 1,000 and a bit items that are known to have existed. And we're trying to digitize all of them. We haven't done all of them yet. We've done some of them. But this, being able to capture and digitize the entirety of Te Reo Māori printed from the 19th century, I think is really awesome. And if any of you are lucky enough to have whakapapa in this area, I mean, this is the best text resource that we could possibly put in front of you, and I hope it's useful for some of you. And I think that's all of the essential stuff. I would be very happy to take any questions from you. If any of you do have any questions, I will have a look in the chat. There doesn't appear to be a Q&A control on this one, but please do let me know if you have any questions. Last bit of housekeeping, I will always answer any questions you have, not just now and today, but if you're ever using Papers Past and you've got some questions like, oh, Emerson, what about the copyright on this? What do I do? You know, I will help. Actually, on that front, quickly show you a thing. If you're using Papers Past and you found an article, if you're curious about whether or not you can copy that piece maybe into a book that you're writing, have a look and see if there's a using this item section. And if it says no known copyright, you know, no brainer, go ahead, use it, do what you want with it, have fun. If it says that there is some copyright, well, then you can still use it if it's for your study, you know, academic purposes. You can still use it if it's for purely personal research. You know, that's if you're literally writing a text that you're going to email to your family members, no issues. But if you are looking at getting a book printed, published, then it might end up in libraries, or you're paying a publisher to print it, or they're paying you, then you might want to think about copyright and do a bit of due diligence. But the using this item section in that case would look a little bit different. I'll see if I can quickly find what it would look like for you. And just randomly jump into one. I think there'll be some around, you know, from the 1930s onwards. Yeah, using this item, stuff is the copyright owner for the Timaru Herald, and it gives you some basic instructions. It's got a Creative Commons by NCSA license. Copyright is a complex little field. If you're wanting to use something from before 1900, it's a no-brainer, go for it. If it's before 1920, probably going to be okay, but check and see if there's an author mentioned. If you want to use something from after 1920, and if you're not quite sure what to do, then you can always email me. Any emails that go to paperspast@nat.gov.nz, they will come to me. And if it says something like, you know, stuff limited, you can always approach those guys and say, look, hey, I want to reproduce a copy of this. Do you have a high-res copy I can license off you? They will probably say, sure, give us a little bit of money, you go for it. And, you know, that's your licensing covered off. So if you had like a couple of images and you want to put them in a book, that kind of seems like not too onerous, but it's case by case. And there'll be cases where I can find something for you which is out of copyright, which might be exactly the same as an in copyright thing, and I can suggest that you maybe use that as well. So feel free to reach out to me if you're confused about how to use Papers Past or any aspects of copyright, any aspects of usage, whatever. You just want to ask about what papers we've got coming up, or if you have suggestions, I'm always all ears. And I think that's about all. I did mention our help page at the top of this talk. Here is the help page. Everything I've talked about today and some examples is on this help page. So hopefully this is a useful reminder for you for a few things. If you want to get hold of us, our contact details are all over the site. They're also on our help page. Just email me and I will do my very best to help. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you very much.